Asia Shaya Beshbich Ahinishna Nankhaidna Bashishi Lagan Dashin Chedo Chine Dashin I see put Hatten Asha Aro Naina Hako Lekin Tate Beldilda Beldilda Sinel Hoyed Ajigo Kekashin and Aro the Quishina Hon Saint and look at a yard in Zade, Minnesota, the curriculum instruction, second language education, I see immersion, James McKenzie. My name is James McKenzie, so it's good to see familiar faces. All of you that are relatives here, and to be back here at Bennett College. And so I think I know most everybody in the room, but in any case, I am a current graduate student at University of Minnesota and focused on second language education with a more specific focus on immersion language education. There's a lot of talk about immersion, and I'll talk about immersion in here. You'll hear me bring it up a lot as one facet of many facets to language revitalization, but a very important one that a lot of people think is something that we absolutely need. So, but for years before that, I think I'll go ahead and go into talking about today's presentation, and then I'll talk about myself. So basically what I'll do is I'll talk a little bit about why it is that we're talking about this idea of revitalization. Some people say, why are you saying revitalization? Why do you even use that term? Especially with Navajo language, one of the most spoken, probably the most spoken indigenous language in the North American continent. Factors related to revitalization and maintenance, what it means, but also the big picture. What are those factors, and what are the different areas that they organize into? It can be overwhelming sometimes. Potential pathways that there are for us to address language revitalization. And then, it's funny, I can go this way. Then I'll talk a little bit about the Navajo language and culture revitalization summit. I had somebody asking me about that again just today. We didn't hold it again. We held one in 2017. So I'll try to get to that pretty quickly because I'd like to share some real preliminary, findings, you could call them, some themes, I'll call them for now, because they haven't been really carefully scientifically evaluated yet, or analyzed, but it's just a first or preliminary look at those themes I'll share with you. And then what pathways we might pursue related to language revitalization. So about me, for those that don't know this, I know I've gotten to know a lot of you here, but in the past, I have a background, aside from the introduction that I gave earlier, about being Navajo and being born in Farmington and then raised quite a bit away from our homeland or in the Albuquerque area, and then coming back and spending the last 8 years here prior to going to Minnesota. Before I got back out here, I studied world languages in immersion language settings in different countries. And so that is really one of the things that helped me discover my propensity for learning language and my love for language, and then really led me to my absolute passion, which is our language. And so I studied Spanish in Mexico, German in Germany, and Mandarin Chinese in China, and gained pretty solid proficiency in all those languages in the time that I studied them. And so after that, though, came back and worked on the reservation in different capacities, and then found my way to Bennett College to really focus on our language and culture. First as a student, and then quickly was put to work and worked here for a number of years. Most recently, working as the director of the Navajo Language Immersion Institute, which was founded here just recently, in the last year. And also working for about 3 years with the Center for Diné Studies, which has now become the School of Diné Studies and Education. So I just threw myself into that and loved every second of it. As challenging and as hard and as great, as much as it kept me on my toes, I loved every bit of it. And I learned so much from the wealth of knowledge that we have here, the years and years of experience that this place, this is a really special place, this institution for learning and for cultivating that knowledge in a space that's very different than other higher education institutions. And I feel blessed to have been a part of that. And I plan to come back to be a part of it if they'll have me. And so that leads to my passion, which is for advocacy for the Navajo, as well as Navajo teachings, culture. The really to my core. It's very important to me, and that's why I'm way off in Minnesota right now studying what I'm doing, and I plan to get back as quick as I can. So I'll just start this with a little quote from a Hawaiian leader and educator, and it's talking about the importance of language and what it means if we lose our language, what connections we lose, and how, I guess, to me it also makes me think about how we relate to our environment, to who we are, to our history. It's not just something that's used as a tool in this sense. It's not just used as something for communication in the everyday sense. It has very much to do with our identity and who we are as a people. And this is the way this kind of helps me to think about how I look at language also, and our language specifically. So why I focus on language revitalization, that word. And my question would be, there's people that will say we don't need to say revitalization yet, but my question would be to people, are we doing enough, fast enough right now to maintain our language and our cultural knowledge? In other words, do we feel confident right now that our language is going to be spoken by the majority of our people, or that even to a high percentage of our people in the next generation, in 20 years, in 50 years? Do we feel really confident of that? And that would be a question that I think would tie directly into revitalization. Something I think that ties into that really well, I'm going to share a little bit of data, a few different types of data, is something that was, this is a slide that I stole with his permission from Shajette Florian Johnson, which some of you know. He's a Navajo language educator advocate who's worked at a lot of these things for some time. And I like the way that he displayed this data because it helps you to kind of see a trend quickly. And this is self-reported data from the Census Bureau, U.S. Census Bureau, talking about Navajo language spoken in homes. So I asked that question, do you feel like we're going to be able to maintain it going forward? Are things just the way we're leaving them right now, as they are we going to just see the language perpetuate and continue on its own? And so what this gives us a picture of, it's self-reported data on surveys, but the blue is people who reported that they speak Navajo in the home. And the orange is people who say they spoke only English in the home. These are people on our reservation, on Navajo. And what you see is 1980 all the way up to 2010, of course, the 10-year different increments of census. Look at how the blue has changed from 1980. 1980, when I was a young boy, there was more than 90% of our homes reported that they spoke Navajo in the home. That's huge. That's great. That sounds like, yeah, why are we even talking about revitalization, right? Why do you want to say that? We have very few people that only report English. But then it drops in 1990 to a little over 80%. And then, if you notice, that jump starts picking up. And then, if you look at 2000 to 2010, it almost plummets. It goes very quickly down. It's increasing in the rate at which it's dropping. And so if you continue on that downward curve, if it's continuing to accelerate at how we're losing it, the question is, we're going to have a census here in 2020, right? And this is a question that people have. If you were to do a modest jump, even almost, continuing on that same trend, is it going to be less than 25% or somewhere in that neighborhood in the next census? Will it be less? We know that the majority of our speakers who maintain that blue area are elders or people above a certain age group, and we don't keep those people with us, unfortunately, forever. We're losing them, and so it's a reality we're seeing here. This is from self-reported data, but that yes, something needs to be done, I think, is what a lot of people are saying. We need to step in and try to do something. So this is a little bit of data. As I mentioned, I work with the Center for Diné Studies here and the School of Diné Studies and Education. Just representing what college students, you might see among college students. This is from 2016, one of the last times we took some of this data and compiled it this way. And what you see here on the graph, the majority of the students from in this blue, light blue to turquoise and purple, and then I guess almost like a pink. These are all the students who tested in at a fairly, what I would tell you is a beginner to low intermediate type of a range. And there's all different ways that you can scale this and look at what that means. But basically it means that they're not able to hold they don't hold conversational proficiency. They're not able to communicate on basic daily things like, I need to go to the bathroom, or what happened outside, or can you get me some water at the store? Basic things like that. Let alone the really depth of the language that people like earlier we heard Avery talking and giving us some more high-level language. And only the small group are people that are coming in able to do that basic conversational proficiency. Let alone, again, those higher levels of advanced or superior language. So you can see that sliver is really, it's very narrow. It's less than that 25% even that we were thinking about in the previous slide. And we've adjusted this scale since, I would say probably within the next few years, assuming that this data continues to be collected, we'll see it even narrow from that. We've adjusted the scale to incorporate immersion classes here at the college, which I'm really excited about. So another thing that's tied to this idea of language revitalization, well, people will say, okay, maybe you're making the point that the language, there's fewer people speaking it, it's not as prevalent in homes, but they'll say, well, but do people really want it? Do young people want it? That's a constant thing that we hear a lot. And so another thing another piece of data that I think, and there's all kinds of different ways you could slice this, but one that I think was really telling to me was when we were initiating a bachelor's degree in Diné Studies and Navajo language here at the college. We did a lot of work with our own student body to try and understand what do they, if they want the language, if they want a cultural studies program, then we'll do it. But if they don't, then maybe we need to rethink this. And so one of the things that we asked was about specifically their attitudes towards Navajo language, towards learning Navajo language, towards if Navajo language is important. You can see all of these, and this was a scale from, I should also show the scale, but I've kind of put together different things from different presentations. It's from strongly disagree, neutral, agree, to strongly agree. All of these statements, students, and these students range in age from the youngest are like 17-ish to up into their 60s or 70s. But the vast majority, they're under, I would say, 50. There's a strong message here that people think that the language is important, that they think that it has value in the modern world, that they think that being bilingual, which is something that people have been talking about and researching for a long time, is valuable or important, will be helpful, beneficial. They want to be able to teach the language to their own kids, which I think is a very powerful statement when people are saying that to you. Regardless of whether or not they come in carrying the language themselves, they're saying this. So we know that if 17% are coming in as those speakers already, but 90%, you know that that's many people who are not speakers that are saying, yes, I'd still like to be able to speak this to to be able to teach this to my children. So it's very strong. Words of affirmation saying we would really like to focus on the language. We'd like to perpetuate it and maintain it. Another element that people talk about when they talk about language revitalization, or they talk about why you would invest time and effort and money, people's sweat and tears, as I can speak to from personal experience, into something like this. They say, well, what's the benefit? There's people that look at the idea of, I'll talk about this in a second, identity, but then there's people that are purely focused on education in the sense of academic achievement, in terms of employability, in terms of a lot of things that some people would say would be the mainstream society saying, this is what you need to value. This is what is important. Well, even if we take it from that angle, we can look at it, and there's data now showing us that students who have this strong connection to their cultural identity, it benefits them academically. Especially folks in New Zealand and particularly also in Hawaii are looking at the positive benefits of indigenous students who are exposed to high levels of their, some people don't like to use the word heritage language, they'll use indigenous language, but how that bolsters their academic achievement. And so one of the best examples is down there at the bottom. There's a really amazing group, and it's not to say that everyone can copy exactly what they're doing, but they've experienced great success in that they have 100% graduation. What Navajo high school can say they have 100% graduation. And 80% of those students go to college. And they're bilingual in their indigenous language and English. Which of our high schools can say that? And I don't mean that to point fingers at now, I'm just saying that this is what they're seeing when they've implemented language revitalization-oriented indigenous immersion types of programming there. So academic achievement can be a both and. That's a real big terminology that I'm hearing all the time now in my graduate program. It doesn't have to be one or the other. It can be both and. You can have language and cultural development and identity, and you can have this academic achievement both within our context in Navajo as well as within mainstream. But what about what about all of these people? They have invested and they are the representations of thousands of years of who we are. Why wouldn't we try to maintain that? Why wouldn't we try to put that as a value that is of utmost importance to us? And so this gets at the piece of identity. It's about who we are. It's not just about academic achievement, many would say, or about achieving within a modern or a mainstream society in terms of employability and jobs and the things that has to do with. Others would say it has to do with re-establishing. So I don't have enough time, we're going to spend a lot of time here, but to go into all the interrupters, all the things that basically try to sever or interrupt our connections, natural cycles of connection, natural cycles of cultivation and generation of knowledge and building that within a person over the whole life cycle that we had. We had our own system of generating and cultivating and building that wellness that some people might call education, which was grossly interrupted, right, over many years. But we can reestablish through revitalization examples and efforts that natural cycle. So this is one model that we've talked about in doing that. Immersion, again, is one way of doing that. Maybe one method, and we use cornstalk. Avery was just talking about that in the last presentation about this growth and development and replanting for the next generation. What's happened is that's been cut off in a lot of cases, right? We have families where they can't pass the language on anymore because it's not spoken. That orange line that kept growing and growing, they're the ones that are, and it's getting bigger. There's fewer and fewer actual corn stalks that are going all the way up to replanting the next generation, right? But we can take measures, in my opinion, to replant those. It's about maintaining this relationality that we have through teachings like to not only people, but also to everything in our environment and making that part of that natural cycle. So factors related to maintenance and revitalization. I threw that word in there, maintenance. Some people prefer to use that as well. There's debates about that. That's fine. But a lot of it gets at the same end. What are some factors? I'll take a couple drinks of water here and I'll ask you all. What are some factors related to maintenance and revitalization of Navajo language that you all can come up with? There's no wrong answer either. I'm an easy grader.
Well, do you mean to support it, factors supporting it, or that work the other way? Because the dominant English environment of schools to me is one of the key things that's undermining the main thing.
Yeah, any kind of factor. Positive, negative. negative, something that pushes, something that supports, that's great. So the English environment within the schools and the types of education, right? Yes?
In the Canadian Arctic and Nunavut, for decades now, maybe 40 years, all the books that are published in Inuktitut, but the Inuktitut in the West is written differently than the Inuktitut in the East. So there's actually 3 translations. There's the Western, a dialect, the Eastern, and then there's English. So all the school books for the children. Some classes are taught strictly in Inuktitut, but they do learn English, but they are also learning to read and write their own language from kindergarten. Well, when they start writing, grade 1, 2, 3. So that would help maintain it and revitalize it. Because they were finding the same thing up there. You get television, and it just makes such a terribly negative, unless the programs are native.
So we'll give you 2 then there. So you also threw in television. Good. Okay, extra credit.
I was going to say the intrusion of technology through cell phones, the internet, and that leading to a rapid loss of indigenous language.
Yeah. Shana?
I think one factor that we kind of may overlook too is the personal health, well-being of individuals. So if individuals are not taking care of their health, they're living shorter, and because of that, they're not passing on that language and the knowledge. So like our elders, the more they grow with internal health issues, they're not going to be passing on the language to folks. So taking care of personal health, I think, is a factor for kids for our language.
Oh, absolutely.
Personally, I kind of think like we would have to make it like important, I guess. Like some businesses, when you know another language or bilingual, you get paid a little bit more extra. So if we think in that sense to where like jobs around here where they pay a little more extra, like say you go into Wells Fargo and an individual is bilingual, they can help out an elderly without giving other people a hard time. You know what I mean? Like out of Spanish, like if you look at Spanish, it's the same thing. You go out into the world, you get a job, and if you know Spanish, then you can actually make a little bit more extra money, dollar, something like that. So kind of put it into a business aspect, kind of make it important to where if you do know the language, you get paid a little bit more. That will kind of drive people, push them to learn a little bit more here and there so they can pick it up because it's important to their job. I mean, I know we're talking about home, but that's the kind of way I see it is, if you know Spanish or any language, you can be on a language line to where you get paid a little bit more.
No, absolutely. And I think it goes way beyond home, just like what you're talking about. These are all...
There are some elementary schools that are teaching it, a few.
Yeah. Now, yes, there are a few. Yes, let me come here, and then I'll go on to the next slide. This is great. I'm glad to hear all of these.
I think it's a personal choice. Families. I come from a home where Navajo was the first language. I had my mom who's 90 years old. That's all she learned. And then we were born. Now I have 2 girls. They're in college, but they speak fluent Navajo. Yeah, so now they're off in Utah going to school with their little ones. And that's where my fear is. And I tell them, I said, talk to them in Navajo. I don't make it to the chain. I thought, should chain 15 months. But that, no way. Key words he understands. So I think it's a personal choice.
Yeah.
If we value our language, again, the identity, I think we can do it. Again, it's just personal choice. That's my opinion. And working here at the college, we do see a lot of students who kind of they, really simple. Then they get you chance to up to the team. Silver dollars are gone.
ceremony is another one too, yeah. Let me come here, and then if I can, I'll probably keep moving, because we could probably talk all night about all this. Right? Yeah.
Like you, I'm associated with the university, so I think if you make Navajo a requirement for graduation, from all the schools and the rest, from this institution, hopefully it doesn't do. But fluency, like they do in Ireland with Gaelic, that's another thing. So homes that don't teach their kids, at least in generations, still has an opportunity to learn the language.
Excellent. Thank you all for those comments. And so I wanted to start with you all first, because you all bring a lot of experience yourselves to this topic, which is huge, right? And so I think you'll probably find a lot of what you just said in here, and even more. And this is just a small, it's like the stars. I started thinking of how to portray this when probably like the second or third presentation I did to the Navajo Nation Council. And they went there, and they went there, and they went there, and there, and there. We were trying to do one program for one facet of this, because, you know, one institution and one department and one group can do so much. But they wanted us to solve all this. They didn't want us to solve it that way, but they tried to bring all those factors into what we were trying to do. And it got overwhelming. And so, you know, all of those things that you mentioned are part of this. There's things that are external, there's things that are internal, there's things that are historical, there are things that are brand new, like technology. There's so many different facets to this, and yet we need to do something, right? If we want to change that orange and blue distribution and try to move it the other way, that's the key question. Can we do that? Have others done it? Yes. So why can't we, right? That's my point here. But all of these different areas are important. And so with that, I'll just point out some of the things that we have highlighted a bit in the work that we've done the last few years before when I was here at the college. We talked a lot about proficiency levels of people that are speakers or are trying to learn, and data and understanding that. Really trying to get some understanding without just saying, oh yeah, I think this person speaks, or I think that that family does speak, but I don't think they speak that much, or this student responds, but I can't really tell how much. Really getting some idea to understand. And that's what leads to some of the data that I shared with you earlier. Also the effects of English, like the schooling that was mentioned earlier, and English-only type policies and things like that, and the media that comes in through technology. If we use technology for English media, right? The rapid decline, and you saw that in the census numbers. Motivation and commitment is a huge thing, right? What motivates? Is getting a job? Is valuing being bilingual a motivator? Is that something that could help us? And also the programs, institutions, and leadership. We think about, we had a partner in what I'm going to tell you about here in the Navajo Nation Council. All of these are really important pieces. So is access, though, right? Not everyone has, not just a mother or father, but even now a che or a masan that they can learn from anymore. It's really simple to say, go home, learn it in the house. One day, do it there. But I can, and I'm sure all of you know this already, it's nothing new. There's many families in which you have to go generations back, and it's really difficult to actually get to that place. The time is huge. And I'll come back to this several times. How much time do we want to spend in the day? How much are we willing to devote to it, right? And what are our goals realistic if we're not going to spend enough time in the language? What are we really after? We need to come to terms with that question. Collective, consistent effort. So we can have 20 amazing Navajo language revitalization programs of any kind, whatever, immersion schools, language nests, whatever you want to have. But if they're all doing their own thing right over the hill from each other, from Rock Point to Round Rock, or from here to there, right? We're not moving in unison. How does that affect the efforts that we're trying to do collectively? That orange and blue lines, right? Because to move that in a big sense, we have so much to learn from each other and to share with each other about the different challenges that we've not only faced but also overcome in the work that we've done. So how many folks know that there was an immersion program in Loop before in the years past? So things like that, right? There's things like we're not aware of it across the board, and there could be sharing, information sharing that takes place. There's a man that was real integral in that, and he tries to share it in his way, but it's only reaching so many people. I'm not saying that that's an ideal program or whatnot, but I'm saying that there's so much more that we gain by working together in unison. Where do we direct our efforts? Do we only focus on children? Are children the only way? Or do we also, as those of us who work in places like the college, do we know that there's a huge group of anywhere from adolescents all the way on up into their 20s and 30s who are, as you saw from that data, thirsty for the language and who could be advocates for the language? If you look at groups like Hawaii, where I was talking about earlier, they've seen great success in implementing revitalization efforts with adults, with young adults, to be able to advocate for what they're doing. Do we make it a choice or do we make it a mandate? That's a big question. And I put these all out there, for us to consider, because there's people who want to say, let's make an immersion school in this community. So anybody that wants to go here, we're just going to change this school that's already an English-based school. We're going to change it over and it's going to be immersion-based. We're going to have whatever model you want to go with, 50-50 English or Navajo, or 90-10 Navajo English. What does that do to those families in that community? How do they react to that? If we make Navajo a official language, things like that. Those are important considerations we have to think about, versus if we make the option open for people to self-select into. So again, what is our language goal? Are we looking at enrichment? Are we looking at something that helps to connect people more to identity? Are we looking at trying to create a new generation of speakers? People who can maintain the language throughout most facets of daily conversation, their lives. If you talk about programs like some of the Māori programs, and especially the Hawaiian programs, that second bullet point is their goal. They don't want anything less than that. They want to create people who are able to function in the language, and not only to function in the language, they want to, and you're kind of getting to this in your comment earlier, they want to create people who value the indigenous language, our own language, above English. In other words, they default to their indigenous language first, and then when they have to interact with people that only speak English, then they use English for those situations. So it's not, I'm going to do English and then I'll do my indigenous language. It's the other way around. I'm going to prioritize the first language. A quick thought on time. And I hope I don't go over on time. I spent a lot of time interacting with a gentleman who's done some real interesting work at a college in Oklahoma with immersion programming for adults, and a lot of time interacting back and forth, sharing ideas. And this is a quote from him, his name is Jacob Manitoa Bailey, where he says, if as native language instructor you have less than 4 hours a day of learning hours with your students, then you are not responsible for developing their conversational fluency. So this is going off of that second bullet point, right? If we want to give people the chance to be conversationally proficient, to be able to hold conversations, he's saying 4 hours a day. That's based off of research that he's done. And then he's saying, if we're going to say that we're going to do something, let's just say 45 minutes once a week, or 1 hour once a week, which is common, right, in our communities, in Navajo schools. As those of you who are educators or who interact with educators a lot know, if we want to do that kind of thing, we need to make sure that we're readjusting what kinds of goals that we're saying we're after. We're not trying to create speakers. We're not trying to help people to be communicators in the language. There's some other goal, because you're not giving people enough time. Time is really important when it comes to, it can't just be time, of course. There's a lot of other pieces that go into it. But time is a critical one that people underestimate a lot, I think. So the bigger picture of Navajo language revitalization, potential pathways towards system-wide Navajo language resurgence. So again, I'll go back to that idea of talking with council delegates and trying to frame it in terms of what all of those different things that are out there, like the stars, all those different factors, right? How do we align them? How do we organize them? How do we conceptualize a way that we can do something that doesn't just overwhelm us? And so this is one basic model. It needs to be developed a lot more, and I haven't been able to come back to it in some time. But one basic model for thinking about different pathways, and there's more than this. This is just one basic model for system-wide, I guess, Navajo language revitalization efforts from various angles. So again, there's people that will say, well, you just got to do it in the home. The school should have nothing to do with it, right? But then we've already established that there's families that don't speak anymore. So what does that do to that large population of people? Then there's people that say, well, let's do it in the schools. Well, but then can you mandate it across the board for all of Navajo, or make it a choice for that many? What schools are there, right? All of these are different areas that have to do with Navajo language and culture learner success. So yes, formal school-based education is one area that we can look at, but so is the home and the immediate family. There's extended family. This is something that we have as an amazing resource as Navajo. Is our relationality is amplified in terms of who are our masanas and bijis and all those people, right? We have so many more mentors and teachers and people that we can look to that can help us. So even if it's not within that one more nuclear family, there's an amazing opportunity within working within K'eh. The same goes for community. Some people would align those together. This idea of media and internet technology, if it's done all in English, absolutely, you can drown out Navajo completely, right? But what if it's done primarily in Navajo? What if it's used as a tool? There are people that advocate for this strongly. So there's all these different areas and ways that we can look at this, and there's more. I'm sure that you all have some more ideas that we can do, that we can talk about, that can be integrated into this. But when it comes to planning for giving our children the benefits of the Nehbazad, what are our ideas? So what specific steps can we take? Sometimes I've led like big brainstorming sessions. Some of you participated with us in some of those, either at the summit we held or in other spaces. Who should be involved? Who should be involved and responsible? How often do we, point over there and say, they're the ones, they should be the ones doing it? Just that group that we saw up there, right, with that model. The school, they should do it. Nah, it should be at the home. Oh, it should be so, it should be. Well, how much are we saying, I need to be part of it? We all need to be part of it. What will be the keys to our success if we are to really make a change? So when I say that part about thinking about who's responsible, I like this idea, this concept is talked about here at the college. And it's not just at the college. College isn't only, it's an ancient concept, right? But there's also the concept of it's not just me, one person that is up to, right? There's others involved here. We can do this together. Remember, I was talking about doing things in isolation versus working together, and what the benefits, how might they be amplified. So what will I do? What will we do as a family, as leaders, as teachers, as relatives of different types, sisters, grandchildren, learners, parents, all those things. These are the types of things that we really need to think of. And going into, after like I said, multiple conversations with different leaders over time, it was decided that we should do something to try and address a lot of those ideas. And that's what led to the 2017 Navajo Language and Culture Revitalization Summit. And so now I'm going to share with you a little bit about that. And I'm glad to have, everybody at Diné College helped out with that, so thank you again all for that. But also I'm glad to have some other folks like Shina who helped out and that were there for that to actually participate as well. In May of 2017, basically this came out of a proposal to the council, as I said. We went to the HESC meetings, and there was a delegate who really stood up. He couldn't be here tonight. I was hoping he would present with me. He's one of the Navajo Studies Board members, or the Diné Studies Board members, Nathaniel Brown. And we decided to just make it happen, stop talking about it, and do it. And so a number of you also attended, if not helped out. It was basically put together when we talk about trying to engage across the whole of Navajo Nation with about 30 members on a planning committee that represented a whole bunch of different constituent groups, students, elders, academics, educators, nonprofits, all different types of folks. The college, there were leaders. There were partnerships with various groups that helped us to try and do this. We tried to make it a Navajo Nation-wide effort. And, you know, for a first time, I think it turned out okay. People felt invested. There was a great deal of investment in it. It could not have happened without many of you who are sitting here too, helping us to actually put this on. And the basic idea was to involve as many people across the whole spectrum of Navajo society. And when I say that, it doesn't just mean on the reservation. There were a number of people that came in from off the reservation, that were from border towns or from far-reaching communities, large urban areas. Some of them were even on the planning committee and contributed these ideas to create information, create dialogue and expression around different perspectives. Because it's easy to have one person like me come in here and tell you, oh, this is what we got to do. We gotta do this, right? But you all have all those ideas about what the factors are, right? There's no way that I can, as one person, or any person with whatever advanced degree can come in and represent all of those different perspectives. This was a chance for us to unite, as it says up there, mobilize around something, and identify and prioritize objectives. So there's an important piece down there that says initiate healing. And this is something I hope to get to in my graduate studies. Right now I'm focused a lot more on kind of areas of immersion that I think will help us. But initiation of healing, we talked about the interruption, right, of that corn stalk and that natural process. How do we do that? Like, can we just learn Navajo language, in other words, as an auxiliary language or as a secondary language? Like, for example, in French Canada, a number of students learn a second language. It doesn't have to do with their cultural identity and things like that. Or like when I went and studied Mandarin Chinese in China, I didn't get caught up with the same psychosocial elements that I absolutely did, that I would say many of us as Navajo people deal with when we address our own language and building our own language proficiency within us for Navajo. How do we start to do that? It's an important one. So these are some of the focus areas. I'll try not to go on too long because I'd like to get questions and comments from people. Areas that we talked about, informational sessions. There were many, like 40-some informational sessions, probably too many. Dialogue sessions, which is what I'm going to share some very basic themes on tonight, and power of unity sessions. These are the dialogue session areas, and they dealt with family transmission of Navajo, school-based education, community, and there's a little overlap in some of the questions that the committee decided to change at one point. And then also addressing that healing I was talking about, intergenerational historical trauma and healing. And finally, we had a dialoguing session with leaders. Some of you probably remember we had a number of delegates there, and they fielded questions. They shared their own perspectives, but they also fielded questions from Navajo people about these concepts we're talking about. The power of unity I won't go into too much because I don't have more information to share on that. But what I want to get to right now is some preliminary, real basic themes that, and this is not scientifically fleshed out yet. It requires more analysis. I'll give that full disclosure to say that it's something that needs to be looked at in more depth. But for now, we have this opportunity to share some of the basic ideas that people that were maybe prevalent in some of the responses, the things that people shared within those dialogue sessions. And the idea, by the way, is that this goes to the Navajo Nation leadership, but really to all Navajo people. It's not owned by anyone but the people. And the leadership can use this then, that was the whole concept with this summit, to then make decisions. So I'm going to talk about two areas. One's family transmission of the language, or cultivating, as probably some people don't like the term transmission, so cultivating the language within families. And then the second part has to do with school-based approaches. So you see the questions up at the beginning, and then there's some key points that are shared below. What observations have people made about the languages that children and young people use with regard to Navajo and English? this is not representing the whole spectrum of the responses. These are some that bubbled up as pretty common within what we saw with the responses. So interesting, right? This is something that people were kind of talking in there. Predominantly English is used by the youth, which would make sense, ties in with that blue and orange graph that we saw earlier. Where Navajo is used is interesting. People talked about it being in places like in ceremonies, but there's also like basic commands like what was talked about earlier, very basic things like that on the reservation. Interestingly, there's a couple people that talked about making heartfelt expression. And what does that mean? And encouragement, expressing clan, their identity. They also talked about negativity or frustration felt, and this is manifest in different ways, but by those that are trying to speak the Diné language. You're going to see that there's kind of, even though I'm showing these on different slides, you're going to see kind of common themes that go across answers to these different questions too. And so just keep that in mind as we talk here. What observations have you made about the language that parents, aunts, and uncles, grandparents use? This is interesting. Adults use English. Or adults use Navajo with other adults, right? People have observed this many times, but then when they talk to children, they switch to English. Many of us have seen that over and over and over. Or adults use a mix of Navajo and English. And again, this isn't to point fingers at anybody. This is just what all these participants were saying, right? That they were coming together to dialogue about. They also talked about elders having difficulty communicating with the young people that they have in their families. What are some of the challenges that you've seen related to passing on the Navajo language from one generation to the other? Here they talked about not having enough time. Remember that point I was focusing on earlier. So there's time within a school context, but there's also time within family context too, right? And some people talk about how they feel almost like they're separated from their children sometimes, in terms of the children spending so much time in school all the time. And if English, as was pointed out earlier, is the medium of education, then how much time are the students getting in the language? Negativity was another one, and a lack of positive reinforcement, right? So many people have commented anecdotally on negativity over the years that I've been working on this, but also the need for positive reinforcement, encouragement. Adult speakers are not using the language enough. And that kind of goes back to the previous slide. Like I said, you're going to see these woven in together, kind of implying that they have the opportunity to do it. Educational system and teaching methods as a challenge. So that was brought up earlier. English dominance comes up quite a bit, and Navajo as devalued. So there's valuing a language for bilingualism, for employability, but also valuing it on a whole bunch of other levels too, right? When you devalue a language, when you put one language up over the other and say, we're going to put all our signage across the whole campus in English. We're going to do all our announcements in English. We're going to put all of these, everything across Navajo Nation in English first, right? What message does that send? Some parents and grandparents don't speak the Diné language. That's going back to that even multiple generations back that people are seeing this. What opportunities or solutions do you see for increasing that transmission in the families? So focus on language through emphasis on family. That was really strong. Embedding it, re-embedding it maybe might be a way of characterizing it within the family. How do we do that, right? How do we do that? If we've moved away from that in some way, shape, or form, how do we do that? And who's exploring ways that we can do that? And if somebody is exploring ways to do that, how do we share that with others so that it can get to the most families possible that want it? Not to say that you have to, but how to increase the opportunity for that. Make safe spaces conducive to encouraging speaking of Navajo language and learning. So that kind of goes back to, maybe it might be linked to the negativity that people feel. If one doesn't feel safe to be able to practice a language, right? And that one was pretty prevalent. Prioritize speaking Navajo, creating immersion schooling. This is the first time you see it, but you're going to see it come up on a couple other slides. Using various types of media, again, going back to what language you're using for that media, and messages to stay in the language. There's a committee we had for a number of years here. I hope it's still going right now here at college. And one of my elders, Shanelle, he says, we got to make messages. We got to put messages out there all over the place and get people to say, Navajo, speak Navajo all the time, all the time. We got to get it to where it's seared into people's brains, to where it becomes second nature. So anyway, just a side note to that. What are some of the challenges in speaking Navajo language in our communities? English dominance, a preference for English, generational language shift and switching. So there's two things in there. One is that within different generations, the language has shifted across a generation, but another is that switching that we talked about, depending on who an adult is speaking to, they will switch to the younger speaker and speak English. That negativity that people say that they experience, maybe perceived lack of time or lack of time, it was kind of implied by one as a perceived. Now perceived as a challenge or a hindrance, rather than like an opportunity, almost like a deficit. Some people talk about deficit versus strength-based approaches or thinking, but as a hindrance. And technology and media on that side, right, as what we were talking about earlier, maybe drowning out Navajo or the opportunities for it. What opportunities or solutions can you think of for increasing the use of Navajo in our communities? How might media and technology help? So this is where the committee decided they wanted to embed the piece on technology and media within this question. And it's interesting that happened because it says various types of media and technology, right? Of course, it was kind of led in there with kind of looking at it in retrospect. Help from the home was very strong again. Creating schools and unique teaching strategies for Navajo language came up over and over. Unity, that idea of not doing things in vacuums again, and making time for the language. That space may be dedicated to Navajo speakers and those who want to learn, maybe safe, or if it could be categorized that way. Promoting distance education opportunities. There's some folks here at the college and elsewhere who are trying to create these distance education. So in other words, if Navajos are studying in Minnesota, for example, how are they going to get a chance to practice their Navajo and continue it and even further it? And publish more documents. There was a comment earlier about the types of documents that can be published and the literacy and how that might affect change. So I'm going to switch and I'm going to try to wrap up within maybe 10 minutes. So we'll have about 20 minutes for question and conversation. I'm going to talk about now a separate set of questions, which is challenges and opportunities on school-based education. This one's shorter. There were fewer comments, and they kind of coalesced a little bit differently. So what are your observations on how Navajo language is implemented within the school in your community? So we're just looking at that one little bubble, right, of school-based Navajo language. One really common thing was that there's not enough time and space devoted to Navajo language. Another was that teacher preparation. This was actually really strong. Teacher preparation specifically for teaching Navajo language is needed. It was implying that it was lacking. And there were mention of needing qualified teachers, people that are certified to teach Navajo language, people that have the language teaching methodologies, language acquisition type things down. That came up quite a bit. Not enough teachers and resources, period, for the teaching of Navajo language. What changes, if any, have you seen in Navajo language, how it's promoted and addressed in the school? So one said that one common theme was that professional preparation and development, again, is common. It's kind of through the whole thread there. Lack of support systems and teachers. Some said that there has been no change over time, which I thought was an interesting comment. It came up sometimes, and as well as Navajo is now offered in college, which is also interesting because it's been offered in college for quite some time, but that was seen as a, and again, that could have to do with people not being aware, right, of what's going on. How much are we promoting these opportunities for people? Another one is, I think I have two more of these, and then I'll turn it over to you all for questions and comments. What are the challenges in teaching, learning, and speaking Navajo language in our schools? Challenges. We need more teachers, teacher preparation, and support for the language. So you see, sometimes the same responses are coming up to different questions almost. It's almost like people have this like in their mind, this is what the solution or our problem is. Not enough time for teaching the language. Again, time. Lack of resources and support from administration and system. The educational system, again, going back to that idea of what are we requiring our students to do in education. What solutions can you think of to our challenges for Navajo language in our schools, and where are the opportunities for learning and speaking Navajo language in school? Immersion programs. This was, so that word has been used a lot, right? It has different meanings to different people, and that's something that I am diving deeper and deeper in. I can come back up from that in the work that I'm doing now. But a lot of people have this idea that immersion is going to be a really, really positive thing that can affect language revitalization for Navajo. And I'm not saying that it can. I'm actually studying it because I also think that it can. There's a lot of message around language nests and early childhood programs. There was also a lot of talk about increasing parent involvement. So you saw different things in there, right? About home. What are we doing with the home? How are we creating resources for the home and the parents? That's a big one that's coming up a lot. We have homes. We have families that are in their 20s and 30s where the parents are first language speakers of Navajo. But how are we helping them to raise that child that they maybe even want to raise in the language when they're finding challenge and difficulty in that, to raise that child in the language? So just some side notes to point out. Create government supports and requirements. And I wish Nate were here because he'd love to hear that one. He'd be like, yeah, let's do it. Because there's some folks that have a strong sense that we need to make an official language, Navajo an official language, and that will help us to create all kinds of different resource streams for these different programs all over the board for Navajo language. But also it sends a message, right? When we talk about messages, when your government promotes and puts to the forefront values, right? Revalues a language. Like has been done in places like Hawaii. It's a state. It has Navajo, or it was a Navajo language. It has Navajo. It has Hawaiian as a state language, and has been done recently in Alaska also with the Alaskan native languages. A movement to emphasize the importance of retaining Navajo language. It's a little bit oddly worded, but basically it was building kind of like collaborative, unifying efforts toward that. I think this is the last slide before I turn it over to you. How can school-based Navajo language education and family transmission work together to increase children's learning and use of Navajo language? They talked about resources, programming for the home. Again, this is a separate question, it's on a separate thing, separate discussion, but this is what people said. Again, it goes back to the home and the family, what resources we have for them. Establishing Navajo immersion programs, childhood and immersion schooling, again, comes up. Working together, collaborating, speaking language consistently. I want to go back to this one more time because people will say, I've heard this a number of times in multiple presentations, facilitated discussions. People say, the parents know Navajo. They don't need to have anybody help them learn. They learned it from their parents. But there's a really different situation now. It's something that some people will point out. In this case, oftentimes children, especially if they're, they're a little bit older children, they're learning as a second language now, or they're trying to learn as simultaneous bilinguals, what they call at the same time, right? It's very difficult to isolate a child completely from English. You can do it though, but oftentimes that parent is also exposed. So there are a few people that are in their early parental age, maybe I'll say, that are completely living their life only in Navajo. If anyone can think of anybody that they know that's doing that, I'd love to see you raise your hand. It's hard to find somebody, right? We have to straddle these different roles and things that we do. So what are those resources? In other words, my grandfather grew up all in Navajo because his mother and grandmother, who he was raised with a lot, only spoke Navajo. Of course, it was easy to do that natural transmission and cultivation. Whereas today, our young parents, even if they are first language speakers of Navajo, they have a very different set of things pulling them in different directions, right? Than my grandfather's mother and grandmother did. So just something to point out there. Okay, so what are the implications? Now this is where I'm going to turn it over and say, thank you for listening to me just go on and on and on. I can do that. My wife's like, hurry up, wrap it up. What are the implications for policy? What are the implications for policy? What are the implications for daily life? Shinad, Dr. Warito over at UNM, he talks about policy within the home. not like official governmental policy, but what's a home policy, right? That could go into both of those first two bullet points. What are the personal implications, individually, and remember I was talking about professional, when it comes to valuing bilingualism. What are the local implications? What are the broader system-wide implications? More detailed analysis is definitely needed for what I'm sharing with you, but these are just some basic things that have started to bubble up from what we're talking about. And I just pose that to you, what are those pathways that we will pursue for system-wide Navajo language revitalization? What is going to work and how are we going to get there? These are things, some of the issues that I've worked on over the last several years, and they're things that I hope to continue to work on for the rest of my life. So I'll stop there and I'll turn it over and see if there's any questions or comments.
So I went to live in Israel, and Hebrew was basically a dead language at the end of the 19th century, and was revived. And it's also a country of immigrants. So if you're an immigrant to Israel, the government actually pays 6 to 12 months, depending on your needs, your rent, give you a stipend. So what you need to do is to go to an immersion program in Hebrew. And this is different from professionals and physicians who have to pass the licensure requirements. And it works very well. My father was an immigrant, he went through it. And my mother was with it. So these things exist, like total immersion for adults, for children, in the country of immersion. These things are normal. I think, speaking as sort of an outsider, I lived on the reservation for a while before. I think it's a decision that the men have to make, that they want it, and go with it. You guys make the decision and push your politicians to put their money where your mouth is. Like, okay, we want immersion not only for young kids, because some of you said, what about the adults? You don't know the language fluently. And it becomes a requirement that nurses, physicians, whatever, on the reservation need to speak the language. It's a requirement. It's amazing what can happen.
Yes.
Just
thank you for those comments. Yeah, I think there's one right there, and then I'll come back.
Actually, activity 감에서 열심히 다시 열심히가 원하는 것이라는 있는 것은 아무 시대에 한 소리 것이는 쓰는 것에 하셔 아무 시하고 I'm really glad that you came back and listened to this part of this conference. Again, thank you for all the work. Kind of miss you on campus. But there's kind of like an aspect that I wanted to bring into this is that technology, I think, is sort of, we have a complicated relationship with it. But for instance, part of my passion over the past few years has been trying to understand this problem of language revitalization a little bit better. And part of that project has been to do a lot of writing to put it out there. So if you Google right now, for instance, introducing yourself in Navajo, the first result is something that I wrote. And I wrote that back in 2012, 2011. And it's just been sitting there. Right now, there's probably a lot of people who are going through and reading that and reciting my plans as if it's them. But what it has yielded is that the amount of traffic, or if you equate the amount of traffic to the website, Navajo Word Today, to interest, that's growing. And over the past, it used to be like 500 people visit the website, then it grew to 1,000. 2,000. Right now, it's pretty consistent. There's 11,500 people visiting the website every month. And I think part of this, I'm trying to understand it a little bit better, and this is something I can contribute behavior of these visitors to the website and to all the content, it's as if these women are giving their devices to their children, and their children are just asking, how do I introduce myself in Navajo? What is the Navajo word for love? What is the Navajo word for mom? And it gives them that information. And I think that is absolutely mind-blowing, because there's a whole generation out there who are learning this primary way of learning. And a way where we learn. It's not instinctual for us to let our going to ask a Siri. I don't want to introduce myself. But I think, especially our toddlers and my nieces and my nephews, they know how to use phones. And I thought I was pretty up to date with technology. But I think right there is an opportunity, at least, to completely change the way that we see technology. I know right now there's a lot of people who think that it's only useful as a distraction. I think even those parents think it's useful as a part-time babysitter. But I think if people start to shift their paradigm and also respond by encouraging some of the more useful types of sharing online, not just like the internet, not just like the crashing, like can this person speak now or blah blah blah. I think the opportunity is just there. It's right. I mean, it's been developing over these past few years. It's interest now. And the tools to use technology in this way are also maturing. It's not so like we don't have to go to the top of the hill for salespeople anymore. And it's only getting faster and faster. And so, in a way, we're critical moment. They don't contribute as much as they do to the website anymore, but it's grown on its own. That's just some insight that I want to report to this because I see technology in the slides and I heard at the summit just what the mixed feelings about what technology is doing. Some people see it as a tool, and some people see it as just a platform.
Yeah. Thank you for those comments. It does that a lot. When you come over here, and then I'll come back over here.
I really like what you said about the Navajo Nation putting the language as a value. I think that does, like he was saying, change that paradigm, of it. And I think when we think about our own values, we go through life, knowing that that's important to us. And if our own nation can't do that with language, I think they're leaving up to us people to do it ourselves. We already see that's not working, but valuing it and putting it across the board. And I think sometimes that whole making it a requirement has to happen. And I think I never really thought about that, but that seems like a really great idea, even from a person who can only partially read and listen in Navajo, and having a conversation would be a lot harder for me. But I think that, when my daughter went through your program for 2 weeks, making it that she could not speak English, she probably learned more than me in 2 weeks than she ever did, than I ever did growing up. I'm the youngest of 10, and all my older siblings all know it. But I always wondered why they never taught their kids who are the kids my nieces and nephews who I grew up with, because they're my age. And so, I just wanted to say, I think that, our men in leadership should really consider, making that a requirement. The other thing is, just learning today, I just kind of realized that, I think learning the Navajo language will, today I just kind of realized that it can't be its own self, that it brings in other components like the culture side of it. And it can't just be a language where that's all you know, because even when my daughter was in your program, she was asking me things, and you had to talk about culture stuff with the language, and I think that it brings in a lot of other stuff than just the language. And it's something I kind of thought about today too as I was going through presentations, that those things are true.
Absolutely. One of the ways that people like to refer to it is like different worldviews and our way of life. Our if you think about it, it's like the lens that we see the world through in Navajo. And when you really connect to the language in that way, all of those parts are a part of it. It's not a lifeless tool. It's there on its own. It has life in it, and we see that when we take it in that way. There's different levels of it, but oftentimes that's what, some of our cultural modules here talk about when they're talking about the language and its significance to us. So thank you very much for that. Let me come over here, and I'll come back over here. Yes.
So I just wanted to say that, one of the last sacred places, it seems, not that it is, but just for the sake of making my point, I will say that one of the last sacred places for Navajo language was ceremony with the Hatafi. Whenever we went to the Hogan and the medicine man or woman came and they performed the ceremony for the patient, it was understood that the Hatafi never went to English. It was always in Navajo. But even that's changing, and I see more Hatafis allowing more and more inclusion of English. And, while people might disagree, I think they need to remain and maintain that sacred place. And as families, we continue to instruct our children and relatives that in the Hogan, Mishra, the medicine man or woman, is that's all we're going to talk about, nothing else. And it's understood, and in some respect, value again for that language, because that's why it's utilized in that respect. And I think we do a much better job at Navajo culture preservation because we apply it daily, regularly. We're good at it. We just need to transfer the same application of that to the language. There has to be more places in which we apply it regularly and often to sort of, there's already success in other places like culture, and I think it's just a matter of transferring those same skills to language and making a place for Navajo and getting us to speak it.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point, because you saw the discussion on spaces a lot, right? Spaces and settings and contexts is what people are really talking about. It can be an actual physical space, but it also can be like a situation too, and reserving that space only for Navajo. And that's where the immersion programming that Lena was talking about, it comes back to that, is trying to make that space only for Navajo. As hard as it is, as challenging as it can be for us, it's about revaluing and creating that space for it. Absolutely. Yes.
One of the things I want to mention, working here for the past 5 years, one of the things that I've learned, working with whether they're young adolescents, fresh out of high school, to mid-20s, 30s, and even some students, non-traditional students, one of the things that I've noticed is they're looking for, you mentioned it in your presentation, Shalom, that's what they look for, students that we have. And we're saying, and I remember 2 years ago or so, and that was coming from Business Studies in the Center for Business Teachers Program. But we don't do that anymore, even here at the college. And so one of the things I want to say is that what my background as a teacher and a counselor, one of the things that I've learned is when we address students like Shiyaj, Shichet, or Shiyaj, they actually stop and listen to you. I know that when we say the word Ashimit, and it's like, talk about, stopping in your tracks. You might be running 100 miles an hour and somebody says that. And that's one of the things that I've looking for that. And then to be able to conversate. And then one of the things that I noticed is that a lot of our Navajo students that are going to school here, who maybe half Navajo, are the ones more interested in learning Navajo. And like during at cafeteria, Shema, I like just chicken. And we do that. And so I think that's one of the things that, the college here, if we could, just like we're saying, promote that. Monday, Wednesday, all men speak Navajo. I mean, just as a start, if we were to do that, I think.
It's like a great idea.
Yeah, that would be.
I'll call it.
I think that would really help, our students too, to hear that conversational piece. And like I said, one of the things that I learned working K-12 is that we can teach Navajo language. They can read it and write it, but if they can't speak it, what purpose does it have? That was one of my, I disagreed with that when I was in K-12 setting.
And that goes back to some of you saw there was a number of comments about the teaching that's done and the type of teaching, the methods of teaching, the preparedness of teachers. That's a huge thing that I'm focusing on and what I'm working on now. And it's something that we have done really well, we have done really well here at the college for the unique context of Navajo. But the way that that graph shifted has changed the way that we need to do the teaching that we're doing. Specifically, if we're going to create immersion schools and things like that, we need a whole different way of preparing people that are going to teach in those contexts. Because it's a lot, it's very different, and there's a lot to help people to create those supports and things like that. For that, let me come here, and then I'll come back there. And as long as you guys want to stay, I'll stay here.
I want to touch upon a couple of things. Like, with yours, I appreciate you doing that. I didn't know there was something like that. And to touch upon that is that there's a lot of tribes that are doing what you did. And from experience, like for example, the youths in Immersion, they have a couple of radio stations that do play, and on almost every single radio station that does play in the area, they got wherever they go. And you can see little kids coming in, there's a word of the day, and then, in their language. So I think we need to make it like our language somehow popular. Because when I went to school, I was criticized for having broken English, I was talked down to for speaking Navajo. When I would ask my teacher about Navajo, I was told, you're not going to need it because you're not going to need it because it's not on the job application, And it's just being criticized by your own people that kind of brings you down. And I think with a lot of our history, it's really sad. That's why a lot of people brush it underneath the rug. But that shouldn't be happening, because the way I take our history as is, yeah, it was sad, but we still prevailed and we're still here. And that's something to be proud of, because for a long time, I was ashamed to be Navajo. I'm not afraid to say it now, because now I'm trying to learn. And it's sad because I can't teach my daughter that. My wife is the one that teaches us. She's the one that's one of the reasons why I fell in love with her, is because she speaks heavy. And she's teaching right in my daughter that I never knew. And I'm learning a lot more, faster, heavier, quicker. But it's taking me time, repetition. I get frustrated, I get irritated because there's stuff that I should know that I don't know. And making it a positive instead of a negative is something that we need to do as a society, as Navajo people. And with us implementing it into the schools, I feel like it should be a big part of school, just like English is. Because as a young age, we learn what nouns are, we learn what pronouns are, verbs, adjectives, but yet we don't even know what this other side is on our own language. Like, we have textbooks now that do teach you how to speak Navajo. Like, when I first went to school here, that's the very first book I ever wanted to keep. But since we were first starting off, we were strapped for money. And I gave it up for $20, right? $20. I gave that book that I paid $100 for. And that's the worst decision I feel like I made, that I sold that book back, because that book was teaching me lot of stuff. I was learning quick on with that book. I was learning very fast. And
Well, buy you that book.
we'll do a donation. I think that book, they brought it down to a level to where I could understand, because I came in not even knowing how to introduce myself like I do now, or I don't even know what it feels like to know what these small words apply to inside of a larger word. And we break down English words all the time. We try to have her build her vocabulary, but it's hard for us to build a vocabulary with not only because it's hard for us to even spell it. I mean, it falls back to ourselves, and I think we have to make it a positive. We have to put it in the school as a mandatory deal in order for our kids to learn. Because if she came home with Navajo homework, I'd be sitting there with her trying to learn it too, because I don't know it. I barely even know how to count to 100 in Navajo, you know? Yeah, I don't even know money ones in Navajo. I see people struggling over at the grocery store because they don't even know how to tell grandma how much change she's owed or how much money she owes them. You go into the bank, it's like that. You get people that are frustrated and they get upset at the individual that only speaks Navajo to them, and they're like, I don't know what you're saying. You know, like, you're Navajo, have some respect, slow down, but you can't say that because you can't actually blame that individual because they don't know. Like, for me, I was taught, you know, my mom, she spoke Navajo to my grandma, she speaks Navajo to my aunties, but like you said, it was never spoken to me. And I was in boarding school, so I was told at a couple of different places, it's not on a job application, you're not going to need it. So I didn't hold that at a very high standard. I held English up higher. I even held Spanish higher, because when I first went out into the world, I went to a call center, and that's where I worked at. And they said, if you know Spanish, you get paid more. And that's where the idea came into mind like that. And it's not just that. There's a lot of other small little bits and pieces that you can promote and give praise for speaking our language, knowing our language. It's just like you're doing, just asking questions, and that's what it is.
Yeah, thank you for that. You touched on like so many different things that we've been talking about tonight, like a lot of them. But just real briefly, I want to comment on a couple. One of them is, you know, congratulations on what you're doing with your family. And I think that's a model for families, because there's lots of families like your family out there where there's one speaker or there's no speakers, and they're trying to do whatever they can, and they're doing something. Just by taking that step and doing that, that's amazing. Wouldn't it be amazing if we could have, again, we go back to this concept of sharing and helping each other, to support each other. What if we could create more knowledge about what your family's doing and share with each other across families in a wide scope? How much that would uplift us to do it together, where you don't have to feel like I'm just by myself, just me and my wife are together, or me and my wife and my daughter, or whatever. There's others over there doing, and they're doing this, they're trying this method, they're doing like 2 nights a week, and they're going to spend all dinner, all those ideas, you know, things you guys are probably doing. That's really powerful. How do we do that? That goes a lot, I think, to what you saw about strategies for the home, and how do we help families? Well, how do we help create more? And it's not that families don't know, but there's so many families. We could, you know, as they share with each other, it will just snowball and get bigger and bigger. And the other one you touched on so many, but the other one I wanted to comment on is, you talked about making it cool. That's something that comes up a lot, especially for young people. How do we make it cool? How do we, there's an idea of value, and there's an idea of power language or privilege language, which I'm spending a lot of time reading about right now, but there's also this idea of cool. And young kids thinking cool, unless there's a new word that I don't know yet. And so I think that's we don't know the answer to that yet. And I think we got to think about that as maybe a little bit, slightly older than young people, those of us that are there. We got to think about how do we make it cool? And a lot of that is I think tied into some things that were said earlier. One of the things I've heard proposed for that is tying it to our identity, tying it to culture. A lot of kids are finding that cool. Maybe not cool like they see something like a meme or a different video, whatever, something out there in the world, but cool in the way it relates to them. So sorry to go off too much of that, but I just wanted to thank you for that comment. I think the next one was back there, and then there's one here, and then we'll come back to that. Yeah.
Thank you. A very good presentation and stimulates a lot of things. For background, my plans are all based but I'd like to share some anecdotes along the road to getting gray hair. For a little background, I worked for Chile School District 2 times in my life, and I worked for Diné College twice when I was NCC and then Diné College. And so some of these things, when I was assistant principal over at Saley Elementary, and one year we had at least half Navajo teachers, and at least half the teachers were Navajo. And one year we had a Navajo language committee, and one year they got all excited. All the Navajo teachers joined the Navajo language committee. And one time, I was in the meeting one time, and I said, how come this is the Navajo language committee? You do all your meetings in English. See, that awareness is almost first level, first step. And that reminds me when I was over here with Ben Barney, who some of you know, he was with Navajo Studies Department, and he was also academic VP. And during teacher orientation, one time he got up and he gave a little speech, marked all in Navajo, and of course the faculty was mixed. Not all Navajo speakers. And he got done and I said to him, Ben, they didn't translate. He said, I know. See, because we're always, like you're doing it, we're always giving in to the non-understanders, if that's the word. And sometimes we think we've got to get stubborn and say, darling, I'm going to use it. If you're here and you don't understand it, get with it, learn it, or, but we've compromised so often that way. Another thing I want to observe is that in the teaching, in the methodology, my parents spoke German before they learned English. And once when I was about 6th grade, I said to my parents, I want to learn German. I didn't learn it. Took it in college. I just learned some words. But then when I tried it, it was too hard. But we need a method. And what I observed that principle, even in primary language, Navajo language classes, we're using an English kind of method in the sense we learn words for things. I know quite a few Navajo words, and they're all nouns. You learn what they call this, clean, chile, so on, but it can't have the verbs. There needs to be a verb-based, thing that goes out. And then with that, when you talk about homeschool cooperation, one of the things I think the schools can do is to give parents, and you mentioned, Mark, in your last point on there, some specific activities, exercises that they can do even around the table at home that says, give me the salt, and whatever it might be, where you give them some sentence structure about basic things. Because a lot of our young Navajo parents, they don't know where to start either. We have this whole group, right, where people say, I understand it, but I can't speak it. So we got to feed them the devices. And I remember when Rock Point years ago, in their earlier years with being a famous bilingual school, when kids came through the lunch line, they had to ask for their food. And when the cooks, they were trained, say, what do you want? It couldn't be a one-word answer. They couldn't say potatoes. They'd have to say, I want potatoes. So there is something to the method. And that applies because I've seen it in Navajo language classes, we're doing that, and at home. Another one is that I was on the school board in Gallup, Kennedy County Schools for a short time. I filled in a position that was vacated. And I developed sort of a reputation because I was always pushing for Navajo language revitalization and trying to develop policies where we required certain things in the curriculum and in the schedule. And that reputation for some people was bad and for some was good because there was resistance as well as support for that. And one of the things that happened is we passed a policy. Policy said you're supposed to have Navajo language in every grade, and there was a certain amount of time, 45 minutes minimum per day. But it didn't get implemented consistently. And then what happened in middle school, it was treated as an elective. So you had to choose, do you want to take Navajo language or music or art? So if you choose Navajo language, you had to give up the other things. See, so that created a conflict. And then another thing, Hebrew schools. When I lived in Sioux City, Iowa, the people in the Jewish background, they had Hebrew school on Saturday, right? Because that's necessary in their services. And now people could do that too, or whether it's the school sponsor or the community or the chapter house, have a Saturday school that's all Navajo. There are ways. So I get kind of going on this too, and it's tough too because one of the factors we didn't mention up there affecting things is intermarriage. My wife's first language was Navajo. She had to stand on her knees in the dorm or in school because she wouldn't stop talking Navajo. She still detests the lady, the Navajo lady who made her do that. She sees her once in a while. But she didn't teach our kids Navajo because I couldn't reinforce it. It's hard if you don't have both. So we need these mechanisms, these things to assist us. So I'll pull my chain here again. How quick is it? Just see if I anything else I really want to get out of the chest. We all watch Star Wars and now.
Yeah, maybe we can come back to you then.
One of the just little kind of thing that we do this. I've had this thought for Danette College and never implemented it when I was here, never got around to it. And with the district too, like in the cafeteria, right? Have a table that's only now speaking at this table. You can sit at it, maybe you don't understand much. You don't have to speak now, but you can speak English. You can listen in, practice it, but make it here. You want to talk, this is the Navajo language table. I mean, there are things you can try. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah. So that's actually something that we've done here, and we've done with the immersion courses that we had, and we tried to scale it up to more, but it can be expanded even more. It's a great suggestion. Thank you for all of
One
this.
other thing, the figure Navajo is using, last I knew, just recently, is that only 5% of the young kids are fluent in Navajo.
Well, there's other
your chart there.
Yeah,
it is.
There's other forms of data that are. That's another area that we really need to work on is sharing data, because there's other groups who have other streams of data that they've looked at and analyzed that paint the picture even maybe more strongly than what I did here tonight. And we need to, as groups working on this, like the Net College, even though I don't currently work here now, I still feel it like it's here, but we didn't share it. And I'll say that we didn't share it as well as we could have, and we should be sharing better so that we can better understand what our changes will be. Thank you.
Real quick, how long did it take you to learn Navajo? Because you gave the graduation address and it was in Navajo. And how long did it take you to talk at that fluency? Because it took me, I started, I was a Navajo speaker, and I started school at 5, and I remember finishing my first full English sentence when I was 9, maybe going on 10 years old. I couldn't speak fluent English till I was almost, I think, 9 or older, like maybe 9 and a half, because I was uncomfortable speaking English. And so it took, that's exposure to English every single day at school. Got home, just spoke Navajo. So that was almost 5 years of, a lot of English around me. So how long did it take you? Because you're pretty fluent.
Well, I would take a couple steps back. People tend to think that I am maybe more proficient than I am. I would say I'm self-evaluating.
Like it.
Some people say that.
You are fluent.
But what I would say is language learning and language development, as I've come to understand it, again, it's like all those different things that are out there. If you look at all the different areas of communication that we could possibly have, especially orally, I tend to focus on oral because that's where I think we need to focus a lot of effort right now. There's so it's like the stars you're looking at out there. All the ways you could potentially describe and communicate communicate, have interpersonal communication, one-way communication with people. And a lot of us, and this isn't just people that are second language learners, even first language learners of Navajo, those stars aren't all lit up. There's lots of spots that are dark all around. And for me, I feel like there's a lot more of those spots. I've built certain ones that are really important for certain types of registers or certain types of situations and contexts when it would be highly useful. But I still need a lot of work, and I continue to do that. I appreciate your sharing that, but it's taken me a long time. Well, I will say this though, so now I'm going to step over to like personal experience. What I've tried to do, and I draw a lot on my experience that I shared earlier with world language learning elsewhere in immersive settings, I've drawn a lot on that to create those spaces for myself individually, but more to scale it up to creating it for others. And that's where the work with folks in CBS and with all the people that I was so blessed to work with here, to create that kind of programming was to, in a sense, not replicate what I did like in China or in Mexico, but to create something that's more culturally appropriate and relevant to us here, but that creates enough language learning and development and supports for that in positive ways that it can go in a similar fashion or a similar pace. So in terms of quickness, in terms of how quickly, I don't want to say hypothesis, my thought though, and as you heard from a parent here tonight about how quickly a daughter learned, my thought is that similar to how I learned Mandarin Chinese quickly in China, if we create that space here and we create full days for multiple weeks, which our students have asked for, those that have come to our immersion programming, if we create that for whole summers, there's no reason that we can't have students jump really quickly through proficiency levels, that communication, because we've only started to test the very basics of that because we haven't taken it as long as I spent in Chinese. That's where we'll see the real benefits. For adult learners, for younger learners, it's a little bit different, but there's still things that are similar. It comes down a lot to the time, it comes down a lot to the methods that are used or the approaches, there's different ways of looking at it. But it's about how we do it, I think, that will really make a difference. Okay, there was one here, and then there was one here, and then yeah.
I just have a couple of stories. I have sons who they learn. So I'm a speaker. My father, our family was relocated. So my parents were off to the state. And for my father, he was going to Navajo, and then they think so. Although someone had to survive, they had to learn English, right? So he would ask his sons rather than teaching Navajo. And I think now that I think about it, I think it was more of a survival strategy for him. That was really working right, so I was like, working stuff like that. So anyhow, so I wanted to share that story, and because I thought that my kids would naturally pick up that because I was a speaker and they could speak. That didn't happen. And so the other one is that I had a colleague at Monday, and they allowed me and they spoke to where I would have a conversation. And I was kind of curious as how they learned on the other side. They rented, so the colleague rented a place with a grandmother who only spoke Navajo. So they lived with the grandmother for 3 years. So that's how they were able to have that immersion process on a daily basis for hours. And that's how they learned. So I thought that was kind of interesting. So I think they were there for 3 years. And so also I think you mentioned about the internet. So I give assignments to finding that I hear more kids, more students say that, it's such a beautiful language, and some of them do take it they don't need it as a credit, but they take it because they want to know. Okay? And so back to what is the formula? Let's do the formula.
That's funny you asked that, because I've heard people characterize it that way. And the way I started to think is there's like 3,000 different formulas, and it depends on each person's and families and situation. There's so many, but I think that there are certain formulas we can come up with. They're not going to be one size fits all, but I think that they're going to be really helpful, and that certain numbers or groups of people will fit into certain, and that we can employ those and use them. Maybe we won't get to everybody, but we'll get to as many as we possibly can. Yeah, absolutely. Those are great. Thank you for sharing those.
I just wanted to thank you for presenting this. It was really good, well presented, and I think that's just something that needs to be presented in different components, not just at the day college, or not just at a language or a cultural program or a symposium or conference. It needs to go beyond that. The way you shape and the way you showed it, how it was processed, because it really gives folks, especially Navajo folks, an understanding of where we are at. They just are in their own world, or they're not conscious of what's happening. And I think the way you presented it was just really well done. And I just wanted to commend you on how that research is going, how the research has been part of your life thus far. It's just really, really well done, and I commend you and support the research that you're doing and the commitment you have to our language and to our people. One of the things I wish some of the Navajo folks stayed here to listen is one of the things that I feel needs to be looked at is making our language a norm back on Navajo. And when we try to teach, I feel like when we try to teach our language, we want reaction back in our language. And the person who, there's not a comfort level or a confidence level for them to return back that language. And I think that having this norm put back in our society will allow that transition to happen. This person will be able to speak, they can speak back to you comfortably and confidently. Whether they're speaking it properly or not, you can adjust it at that time. But I think that's just a norm that I feel like we need to really work on. And I think so. I just don't think that Navajo Nation government level is the vehicle for our language personally. But I think they can provide some assets and some components to how we can make it a norm. So when we used to attend social events, there was always this English speaker and then an interpreter that was a Navajo. When you go to the fairs or rodeos or powwows, the MC was spoken in Navajo and in English. You don't have that anymore today. So I think the Navajo Nation government should make all social events in Navajo in order for it to become a norm. And that should be a policy that should be written. All social events on Navajo, rodeos, for parades, fairs, basketball games, all of these different things. So it starts to create this comfort level for folks to hear it often. That's something that I've experienced and that I've observed the past couple of years. So I just wanted to commend you and make that comment. So I'll put it.
Yes, just real briefly, I'll say back, well, thank you for that. And I appreciate what you said very much. I'm humbled by that. I want to say that the part about normalizing is really interesting. There's so many different efforts that we can do within families. It doesn't just have to be at, like you said, at Navajo Nation level. It can be at Navajo Nation level. It can be across the board within institutions. It can be within our nuclear families. But also, I think normalizing the use is a really powerful thing. The other part is to normalize the idea that any speaker can be a mentor or a guide. You don't have to think of it, because a lot of speakers, I've talked to so many elders that are master speakers, and they they have themselves been oppressed and had gone through historical trauma, to devaluing their own ability to cultivate the language in somebody else, will be to elevate them again and say, you are a mentor, you are a teacher, you are a language cultivator. And giving them little tools also, just like we were talking about for families, to be able to help nurture that language in those normalized, when that normalized situation comes about, and that young person is maybe a little bit apprehensive, or because they've been burned by negativity before, to help that mentor, that speaker, that language holder, to negotiate, they use that term in language a lot, negotiate that meaning, and to help them develop the language in a comfortable way, in a way that tells them, I want to help you, I want to get you to this place, and it's okay, make mistakes. Nobody ever learned a language without making a mistake, first or second or third or fourth or anything else. But what you're talking about, that normalization, it's almost been made as if, as you're learning, you already have to be perfect at it. Who's perfect at anything as they're learning anything, right? So normalizing it in terms of its use and its, how pervasive it is, but also normalizing the idea that we're all learning. And there's no one, Wilson Aronith, who's here, who's 86 or 7 now, he'll say he's still learning. He doesn't know everything. His knowledge is as small as a mustard seed. I love that way of conceptualizing knowledge. We all have something we can learn, and with the language, and so I totally agree with what you're saying. So, I really appreciate you sitting here with me this long, and this has really been a great evening of dialogue, so I appreciate it.
Yeah.